always tell them, you've done your part. You've instilled your values. You've instilled your teachings. Now you can trust God is looking after us. Trust that we have learned properly and grown up to be, the adults you hoped we would be, and maybe more. I keep telling them to find hobbies, to pursue things that will make them happy. Keep busy with their time, because that helps them not overthink and also helps them have a fuller life.
I've realized that, hey, maybe financial presence, giving back to them wasn't really what they were looking for. What they were looking for was time and kind of just spending quality time together, doing things together. That's when I realized maybe I just do different activities with them. Maybe I can spend time with them. If I worry about their health, I can go exercise with them, right?
I think our parents came from a generation where they worked really hard, right, to get us here. In that process, though, they ended up focusing all their time and attention on one sole thing, our immediate nuclear family. My life is for my children. My mom always says that to me, right? We are the only reason why she's living, right? The only reason why she wakes up every single morning. And while that's beautiful to hear, right? And I know that means she loves us so much, it's also heartbreaking. She's given up her passions, her hobbies, everything is thrown out just to raise us. All right. So welcome to the Level Up With Us podcast. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Nadine. She's here together with us in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. And we're so excited to have this conversation because, as you know, this podcast is all about talking about perspective shifts that we've had in our lives that has helped us think differently about topics that we might have previously thought very differently about. And I think it's a really good chance for us to open up about these and help other people who might be on the cusp of being on these experiences and also trying to figure out how to move forward on these, difficult situations in our life. And for this topic specifically today, I think we're going to be talking about, how to deal when our perspective shifts, when our parents are getting older, right? And not even just parents, relatives, right? As they get older, how do we deal with that, right? How do we take care of them? How do we be there for them, especially, as we are living busier and busier lives, as we are growing up as children into newly minted adults. So without further ado, let's get Nadine to introduce herself a little bit to the audience. A little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what your perspective on this topic is, just a high-level overview.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the intro, Conrad and Jessica. My name's Nadine. I live in Vancouver and I work remotely in tech as a support person with a particular niche. I like liaising between parties, and that's what I do for work. And I am honored to be able to liaise some information to you guys now based on my own experience. So on this topic, it really has a special place in my heart. You know how they say the greatest changes in a person's life come unexpectedly or come when required, you're forced to acknowledge and recognize a situation. I've always thought I was a caring, compassionate person who looked after, my family first all the time, would make the sacrifices without question. But only recently when I noticed my parents' health, physical health deteriorating, mental health, you see the signs, did the shift really hit me hard. And I'm glad that we're talking about it. My first time talking about it, really. I'm not sure if I'll be able to convey it as well, but for me, everything that I used to think of just got thrown out. Small things, I used to think I'm making this sacrifice just for my parents' comfort, such as I used to be really OC about, hey, outside clothes, no sitting on my bed, small tiny things like that. Yeah, now everything is easy to let go once the value of and the importance of, are they okay? What can I do for them? Mm-hmm. That's the top of your mind, and everything else is just secondary. It's all replaceable. It's all fixable. And then you think communication becomes the biggest challenge because now they're forgetful. Now you want to argue with them because you did not tell me to make those reservations. You might have thought to tell me, but you never did. But you can't argue with them that way anymore. Like, you just have to be understanding. And ideally, because you want to make the most of the moment together, because time is really, as we grow up into minted adults, we have so many responsibilities. We're running here and there. We have to be intentional about the time we set up to spend together with them. And you don't want that time to be you guys bickering over tiny trifles. You want it to be something that means something to them. Maybe small things, or just a pleasant time that seems like a normal everyday moment. But for them, it actually means a lot that you're there, you're present, you're conversing with them intentionally. So I try to learn how to communicate with them better. And I think that's still my biggest struggle. Like, I automatically get defensive when I know I'm in the right. And now I'm learning how to turn things around so that, you know how young people, especially children, they tend to automatically be considered sweet. Like, they approach an elder, the elder is automatically filled with joy, and they find them, everything they do, adorable. And there's a word, it's like sip sip, like they're flattered very easily.
Yes. Yeah.
So now I'm trying to learn how to be more sip sip. Like, just, I'm in the right. You really did forget to turn off the light last night, but I'll turn it around, and I'll make it a joke or something, make light of it so that they don't feel like they're getting older and they're forgetting things. They can maintain their confidence. And it's a perspective shift. I was excited to really be on my own, actually, now that I have a stable job, stable income. I was so excited. But really, when I lived alone just for a few months, I was constantly worrying about them. And I ended up moving back with my parents, really, because I figured they kept saying they have another good decade of mobility. And then I'm like, why are you guys saying that? You guys are young, you guys are healthy, you're vibrant, you're, vitality. So I'm not sure if that explains the perspective shift, but I hope that gets us started on the topic. And
very wonderful start. Yeah. No, Nadine, I'm so glad we're having this conversation. And, I think it's an important one. And thank you so much for opening up to be here on this podcast to talk about this, because, I felt myself choking up a little bit hearing you, because it's an important topic to me so much. I resonate with what you're saying, right? We all strive to be independent. That seemingly was the goal, right, of growing up. Seemingly that was what we were all aiming for, hit your 20s, finish your schooling, get a job, go out there, make your mark on the world, right? And knowing that, obviously depending on when your parents, had you, right, they might be at varying ranges, but obviously you can see that the person they were when you saw them as a child versus as an adult, they're much more older, much more haggard, right? And how you can show up for them is something that I often constantly battle, right? How much time do I devote to their time and attention, like to their care? And I think, it's really nice to me that, you've realized so many things about this, and I'm sure more of it will come up, but I just want you to know you're not alone in this. And hopefully, this is something that can help us all unlock something, because again, I don't think it's a unique problem to me and you. Everyone has parents. Yes. Everyone's trying to deal with this.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not until after I moved away for school and came back to see my parents, that's when I noticed the difference. Because, as you're growing up with them, you don't really notice them getting older. It's really when you step away and you come back and you see the difference, where you're like, wow, like I didn't realize this in the past. And then for me, I started feeling like, oh, hey, like maybe it's just something more, I can help with them about it. And then when you mentioned kind of trying to turn things around and like making them not feel old, or like making them feel confident about their current abilities, I think that's so important, because I've seen it in some other older individuals, is that confidence and determination that they feel like they can still do anything and they can still be very capable of taking care of themselves. That is what basically keeps their vitality and their energy. And I think it's great that you're like, hey, let me like work with it. I think it's very like inspiring to see, because you're like, hey, I recognize this, but like, what do they need? So I wanted to ask, you said you felt, I think you mentioned how you felt a bit conflicted about like seeing their change, and then you were trying to explain some of like what changed from what you thought before and what you think now.
Mhm.
How did your feelings kind of change from like when you first realized it to when you decided to kind of accept it and kind of solve it the way that you had described?
So really, I think all of my aspirations, like becoming independent, making my mark on the world, I think I like us, my subconscious, I was already aware because I was living with them at the time, right? When growing up, getting through college, first few years of working in a real full time, being a working adult, paying bills. I think I was in my subconscious, I could already tell they were getting older, but my fight or flight instinct is always flight. And I feel like I used my reasoning of wanting to be independent, making my mark, living my life and finding out who I am, my identity. All of those things are very important topics. And I love getting together with people to talk about it, right? What are your aspirations? And I use that as a reason to move out. But really, if I look back on it, maybe I just wasn't ready to deal with the fact that I can already foretell my parents are getting older, and their joy in life is spending time as a family. Like we always, I tend to wrong my parents for their mindset, but I can't blame them for it either. The mindset where they've lived their lives for their family.
Mm-hmm.
They moved here for their children to have a better future.
Yeah.
The sacrifices they've made. And I always tell them, you've done your part. You've instilled your values. You've instilled your teachings. Now you can trust God is looking after us. Trust that we have learned properly and grown up to be, the adults you hoped we would be, and maybe more. More than you can handle.
Hopefully.
And I'm like, didn't you have dreams when you were younger? What did you want to do? What's on your bucket list? I keep telling them to find hobbies, to like pursue things that will make them happy, keep busy with their time, because that helps them not overthink and also helps them have a fuller life. But it's hard for them to get out because they've lived all those years raising us, and they say, my mom always tells me her happiness really is just chilling. She's a homebody. Like even if she wasn't a mother, a full-time mother, like she has no second thoughts about giving up her career because she had children. She and even on vacation, she's like, I don't care where we go as long as we're together, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that weighs on me because I'm like, that means her joy is company, which means my time is finite and limited. And I want to kind of network with people, I want to grow myself. There's so many things I'm pursuing. At the same time, like I realized, if that is her value, that is her mindset, I can't change that. I can continue to encourage her to find hobbies, to do new experiences. But I also have to acknowledge this is who she is. And that's because of the choices she's made. And it's because of her choices that I have become who I am today. The opportunities she's allowed me. Like sometimes I tell her, I realize actually the things that I'm telling her, don't you feel like we're not growing ourselves? Like why do we spend so much time and effort thinking about others. Like every time there's an occasion, a birthday, Christmas, our focus is on what does that person like? What would they appreciate? And, it's never reciprocated, which I thought I was doing her a favor by trying to teach her otherwise. I was telling her, start thinking more for yourself. For us, like we don't travel because we're always thinking the budget, and like, well, if we cut down a bit on gifts, we can afford to travel together, and go places. But I realized that was my own desire that I was pushing onto her. Like, she doesn't really care. She's happy even just watching TV with me at home or grabbing a meal. So now I've made it a point to call my siblings during the weekends or a day before and be like, what are you doing this weekend? I can swing by, grab you, and we can have a meal with mom. Things like that. And yeah. I kind of derailed from your original question.
No, it's okay. I think it's amazing how you kind of realize what your parents think are things that make them happy. And I'm really, really glad that I think you're able to provide that for them. And I wanted to know, like, how did you figure that out? Was it something that they've been saying over the years? Like, as long as I spend time with my children, I am happy. As long as we're all together, we're happy. Like, was it something she said and it like sunk in recently? Or did you like sit down and you guys like talked and she kind of shared about it?
Yeah. So when you start having that perspective shift, when I realized I ran away to live on my own with the excuse of being independent, finding my identity, growing myself, I realized I missed my family and I wanted to go back. But even after I went back, it took months. Like I thought everything is normal. It's almost like I never moved out. But nothing had changed. It had to be very intentional, to have those conversations and to acknowledge like when she forgets the stove or when she goes out of the house and small behavior changes that I point out to them. Like initially I'd let it go because I didn't want them to feel old. But when they would make the comment themselves like, oh, I'm so forgetful, I must be getting old. That's my opportunity to have that conversation. Like, I'm like, you really are getting old.
That's funny.
The other day, or I use them to communicate to each other because they tend to be independent adults themselves, right? Sometimes too independent, where I'm like, I can't always be there. And the only way I can have peace of mind is knowing you guys are there for each other. I know you communicate, but usually you communicate for the needs of the house, for the needs of your children, not for your own needs, right?
Sure.
You're never asking for help, not from your kids, not from each other. So I'm trying to shift their mindsets, not only to make my life easier and have peace of mind, but because for me, like even acknowledging they need that, it was already a perspective shift. But I know I grew up like with a mindset of you have to be independent, solve your own problems. We grow up not asking for help, or at least finding it difficult to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I've realized now, maybe I picked that up from them a bit.
Oh, sure.
Right? And now I'm like, well, I've finally learned to ask for help because I found CoX3. I found people who are open to discussing these things, and I'm not alone in this venture. Like, it's really healthy to have these conversations. We get ideas from each other on how to approach things, or at least we learn empathy. Like, oh, I'm not alone, or this person is going through this. I don't know what it's like, but I can try to do what I can or hear them out, because who knows if I'll come across something else or someone else who could use this valuable experience that they're sharing, or I can be a support for them at that moment.
Real quick, we are supported by the CoX3 Family Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to help people live better lives. And one way we do that is by bringing together people who are like-minded, who care about growth, productivity, and learning to really come together and help each other level up in an amazing online and offline community. So Nadine is actually someone who's joined us like from 2020, I think. And she's an OG member of CoX3, and she herself has, I hope, gained so much from her experience with our community. And maybe if you'd like to share a few words about how CoX3 is like, how it helped you.
At any stage in your life, a second winder, a student, college graduate, or
Creative,
doesn't matter where you're at. You can come into CoX3 being yourself, and you're going to find people who just want to support you, who are just curious to learn about you, who want to help you get to the next stage in your life or help you figure out the problems that you may be having. And even though we might not have the answers, people there are very supportive, and you'll come to realize, hopefully, that while being there, you truly can just be yourself. No filters, nothing. Like, nobody will judge you. As long as respect is conducted, communication is conducted in a respectful manner, you will be able to build or find like-minded people who are on a path of trying to support others while also solving problems themselves. And it's a community where your mind is encouraged to grow, to expand, to see and think outside the box, and you realize the limitations that you felt. For example, when I joined, it was COVID period, where you couldn't go out, you couldn't be with community, you couldn't see friends. There were so many prohibitions that might have made you feel suffocated. But really, because I found this community, I realized my comforts in life, the community I was spending time with, there's so much more life has to offer. And I hope that you find that too.
Yeah.
Everyone deserves that. Everyone does. And you don't have to feel anything. Just come in, be yourself. If you get busy, you don't have time to be online, it's not healthy for you to be online, your doctor says stay off the screen, that's fine too. We have lobbies where you can just chat without looking at the screen, or you can take time off if you need, and you're always welcome back anytime.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the most beautiful thing about it, right? I mean, many points there. One is that everyone's going through something, and the chances are that someone else is going through something similar that you are infinitely high, right? So what we're trying to do is to cultivate an ethos of sharing, right? Things that we're going through, of sharing challenges that we have, of sharing ways that we've combated those things where, like Nadine said, it's not like an exact, match. It might not be an exact match to your situation, but just knowing that someone is going through something similar and is willing to listen to you and hear you out about the things that you're doing. And if the problems are similar enough to build something, to solve it together, why not, right? You don't have to be alone in this world. We can all do this together. And like Nadine said as well, if you want to come online, we have a community online that you can join with chat rooms that you can do anything about, and everything in there, right? Just from chatting people to co-working to just having meaningful, deep conversations. We have a space for you, but also we have physical spaces in real life. If you want to join our co-living communities, we're building them all around the world. We have them in Singapore, in Japan, and in San Francisco, San Jose, Bay Area coming up. And who knows, maybe one in Vancouver. We'll see. Stay tuned. So yes, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to meet really nice people like Nadine, who has amazing stories, makes you feel warm, welcome, this is like the best place I've been in. Really, I love your space so much. It's so cozy. You're such a good host. Thank you so much for having us, including us in your space, letting us have your podcast in your place. Thank you so much. And back to the podcast.
And when I had that mindset shift, I found it really helpful even in work. I never used to ask for help. I used to think, your manager doesn't want to hear this. They want you to just solve things and give them the final resolution. Yeah. But then I realized, actually, people who share the struggles or make light of it, like, oh, this customer, they asked the most ridiculous thing today. Yeah. And then we laugh about it. But really, it's a small way of letting them know, hey, I'm doing this work. Hey, I came across this problem. And also putting it under their radar. Whereas I used to just quietly keep my head down, do my job well, and, show the results. But then I realized I'm not making any connections. My boss doesn't know what's up with my life. She even was surprised to find out You know how to speak Tagalog? What? You were born in the Philippines? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, this never came up. Like, it's not like I'm hiding myself. It just wasn't my nature to share. And I think I got that from my parents, being private or being independent. There's a limit to it. We have to set a boundary, and then we have to realize, and I think we're all aware of this, one human alone can do nothing compared to two people together or a community together, right?
Yeah.
So trying to build the family as a community, and then once we have that solid ground foundation of relying on each other. My parents, I know, are communicating, relying on each other. I understand what medications they're taking. Like, should anything happen, I can vouch for them. I can give the full history. Then I also want to start working on expanding that to the clan. Like, we should become a bigger community of support to each other, especially as we struggle through this. And hopefully right now, I'm still working on it. It's a lot of planning, but hopefully small things, I'm trying to create a shared family password manager, teach them how to use it so that, should anything happen to any of us, we all have access to each other's assets. We're all aware of what's happening in that person's lives, and we can cover for each other. Like, I know where your will is kept. You know what's in my will. Small things that we never think about. It's a bit morbid sometimes, we joke, but it's something we have to address, and we have to do it intentionally. So when we have an opportunity to have that intentional conversation or to teach each other how to ask for help, best do it. So that is, I think, what's been the most challenging is communicating in a manner where you have a schedule, you have a plan, you're trying to follow it. But when that opportunity rises, like she was cooking lunch for the family and I'm working upstairs remotely, and then I hear her drop something, or I realize, hey, her phone's right here with me. Like, what's she cooking downstairs without her recipe right here? And I'm like, hey, then I'll just take a break from work and then do it right then and there, because it tends to be, you don't do things in your schedule. You do things according to what's happening around you. And it's opened my awareness as well, where my values shifted according to their needs. So it's not just it really is a full perspective shift. It's mindset, it's values, it's the way that you're acting and reacting, because we all tend to be reactive people, right?
Absolutely.
And then once you've started getting a handle on that, proactively addressing it, such as, just writing a will or asking them, what are the assets our family has? Like, things like that would never cross your mind until an emergency happens. So, so much to think about.
There's so many amazing things there, Nadine. And first and foremost, thank you so much for, one, being this amazing person that's thinking about all these things. And then two, also sharing about this, because I've already said from the beginning, I resonate so much. And I think some main points I think are super important for us to remember, and also for me to share a bit about from my own experience as well, is that number one is that I think our parents came from a generation where they worked really hard, right, to get us here. I think our parents were all immigrants, right? So they worked hard to get themselves from their home country to a brand new country with little to no support and try to build that life up. In that process, though, they ended up focusing all their time and attention on one sole thing, our immediate nuclear family. And it was so difficult, right, for them to see any life beyond that. My life is for my children. My mom always says that to me, right? We are the only reason why she's living, right? The only reason why she wakes up every single morning. And while that's beautiful to hear, right, and I know that means she loves us so much, it's also heartbreaking, because knowing that she has nothing else to live for. She's given up her career. She's given up her dreams. She's given up her passions, her hobbies. Everything is thrown out just to raise us. And I just think that, every time I talk to her, and my father as well, is that, how can I help you pursue what you want in life? What do you want in life? What are the things you gave up because you thought you had to, because you did have to probably, right? And to me, that's where the second point comes in, which you hammer down really well, is that, now is actually the time they should be exploring their second interest, right? And the third interest and so on. I think that's why for me, like why Coach 3 was so important to have the retirees, right, or second winders, we call them, as a demographic we'd like to help, is solely because I saw my own parents in that camp, right? Your kids have left the nest. What do you do with your life? What do you do with your time, right? And I don't want you to be just lamenting and waiting for the next time your kids contact you to reach out for a meal. That shouldn't be your life. How can you fill up your time with things that you enjoy? So it's so pleasing to me now to be able to hear when they say, oh, I went with so-and-so friend for a meal. Right? I'm like, yeah, great. Who's your friend? I want to know all about them, right? Or, oh, I'm going to go off, to this country to go on like a vacation. For the first time, my mom went on a vacation by herself. For the first time in over 25 years, she went on a vacation by herself without any of her children, right? That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And I think it's just so interesting to me that like we have the luxury, right, of being raised and having the exposure to like, hey, you can pursue the dream that you want. I love that. I think we're very blessed, and I'm very appreciative of the parents that paved that way. And so I fully understand when they also don't see our point of view a lot of times because they weren't raised that way. And I can also very much resonate with the frustration that we might have when we go to our parents and we say, hey, what else can you be doing here, right? And trying to get them to open up, trying to get them to share, trying to get them to ask for help. Those are all things that are foreign to them because they just had to do it on their own. They just had to figure it out, right? And so a lot of my time that I spent in the last few years was helping my parents not only find reliance within, their children, myself and my siblings included, but also help them find reliance amongst their friends, right? Because their friend group are probably the only people that understand them the most, right? They can go to their friend group and say, oh, I'm aching here and there. Like, yeah, me too, how about that player too? It's they understand, they get it, right? We can empathize certainly, but we don't feel the same things they feel. And so I've seen a lot now too, where my parents are connecting with their relatives more as well, right? Relatives that they may have been estranged from because of distance and whatnot, but they're coming back together because, hey, we have shared experience, and hey, our kids are grown up, and hey, we don't really know what we should do with our lives, right? So I absolutely love that you put community within all this because I think it's so important. And I often think back to what Jessica shared about, she's doing a PhD right now in longevity, right, and aging. And one of the main things to really boost your longevity is having community around you, right? Having friends you can talk to, having a sense of, belonging. It's such an important topic. And it's so important to also even talk about actionable steps on how like really to help convince your parents there. It's not really about convincing, to be honest, it's about them realizing getting there. I feel like no matter how much you shout at someone or like not shout, but like talk at someone, right? Nothing's actually going to happen unless they believe it themselves, unless they believe that they need to do something different and that they want that different outcome in their lives.
I mean, the topic really means so much for each of us, I think. So when we're listening to the other person share, it's just a lot to absorb because we're thinking about their position and where they're at with their parents and empathizing. At the same time, we're thinking back to our parents and our own experiences, and we're trying to see how can we do the same, or how can I also give some advice? There's so many thoughts.
Exactly.
So take your time to sort through.
No, I think it's very, very interesting, and it's a really awe-inducing that all of us are born to parents, and so we have parents, right? So like it's just very like, wow, like we all experience something very similar, even though like different factors of it will be different. But I think at the end of the day, it's really like, hey, we're all aging. We're aging at different times of our lives. And it's like during that change, what can we do? And what can we do for the people around us? And I think it's different for everybody. So then that's also like the fun and the tricky part, right? Because like what might work for you might not work for other people. But I think it's just there's like a sense of unity there where I'm like, wow, like everybody's really experiencing a similar problem, right? And I think I also feel very lucky that like my parents definitely spent all their time and energy to like raise my sister and me growing up. So then looking back on it, I'm like, wow, like it's I feel very, very fortunate and lucky to not have those worries and be able to have the childhood that I did have because of like all their time and effort. So it's like, but I guess also in their generation to them is very natural. Like, this is my family. I'm going to put my time and effort for them. They don't have to pay me back. Like, at least that's what my parents think, right? It's like, why would my children pay me back? Like, I did this for them. Like, as long as they're happy, then I'm happy. But like you said, like that's a very singular, I guess, direction of happiness, which is great. But then wouldn't their life be so much more fulfilling and colorful if they also had other forms of happiness they can also tap into?
100%.
I think like this is probably a good moment to also like talk about one more thing too. And this is that like, at least for me, I and my friends, I observe a lot of guilt. I think guilt is a big feeling that we often feel where it's like, am I spending enough time with my parents? Right? Am I doing enough for them? Yes, they might say that they don't want anything from me if we're lucky to have parents that communicate it that way. But we also, I think, very much often feel like it's not enough still, right? Because, oh my gosh, how can we ever compare to like, the amount of sacrifice, amount of investment, amount of, everything that they put into raising us up, right? So how does guilt manifest for both of you guys? Like, I'm really curious about that. Maybe Nadine, you can share first.
Yeah, I used to hold a lot of guilt. In fact, I still do. Like, for example, I ate at this amazing restaurant when I was in Japan with my parents, and I couldn't finish my steak. But this is Kobe steak. This is
nice
a
stuff.
once in a lifetime. Okay, not once in a lifetime, but this is very rare to enjoy. I couldn't finish it. And for some reason, like, instead of offering it to my dad, who I just assumed was full like me, I offered it to my cousin. Is he my cousin? Oh, technically he's my mom's cousin. So my uncle, who I just met that day, who was hosting us because they live in Japan. And I was extremely conscious of, the new people who I've just met. And I was paying too much attention to them instead of my own parents. And then when we got back to the hotel, my dad opened up jelly and snacks and was eating. I'm like, did you not get full? No. And I was like, it hit me. Why did I give this extremely difficult, expensive dinner meal to an uncle who I will never see again in how many years, rather than to my own father, who rarely gets to enjoy such delicacies? And that, my parents laughed it off. They're like, yeah, why didn't you? Like, now I'm eating these snacks, from the convenience store, and, I'm still hungry. I was like, I didn't even offer. And they were sitting side by side. So I know when I approached the plate, something stopped me, but I didn't process in my mind. I looked at my dad and I looked at the uncle, and then I started talking and just offered it. But until now, I feel really guilty about it. And I looked, like when I came back home, I looked up A5 Kobe steak. Like, I'm going to get my dad the fresh piece of steak here in Vancouver and like give it to him. And then I'll get rid of that guilt. But, it's not the same. And it's just something I acknowledge. Oh, it was a forethought that didn't cross my mind. And there's no point in feeling guilty about it. Even my parents are like, why are you still talking about that? Why are you even wasting time looking it up? Like, to them, it's done, and I think I need to let go of that guilt and simply learn from the experience so that it doesn't happen again. And every day I realize these expectations I put on myself because of the huge undertakings my parents have gone through. And even if they didn't, even if I was at odds with them for a while and then came back together, because I know not everyone has such we're very blessed to be really tight with our families to share such love, but not everyone grew up with that experience. Even then, like whatever may have happened in the past, whatever bad feelings there might be, whatever guilt you might carry, like because of the love, the exaggerated, like overbounding love that they've given you while you were growing up that you can never, ever repay. You just acknowledge it. Like there's no such thing as, okay, I'm going to hit the lottery and then, I'm going to give it all to them and I paid back like my life.
There's no monetary number.
Exactly. There's no
back.
monetary number. And even if you lived your life for them, which is really unhealthy, you'll never make it up. So you do everything in a balance. And it's in the small things, because what is your focus? They gave us this love. And now, even if they didn't give us love, but we still love them. We want them in our life and we want them to grow old in comfort and painlessly, as well as they can, live as long and happy as they can alive, be fulfilled. That's what we have to focus on, the intention. And when I'm communicating with them, even when I want to reprimand them, like, because it can be so frustrating. They still see us as children at times, they don't acknowledge what we're saying, but if someone else says it, the exact same thing, they're like, oh, that's so brilliant. You're just like, and now I just think about, what is my intention? It annoys me because I care. So it's good that I care. Let's move past the annoyance and the guilt and the small things that are eating away my energy and focus on, okay, this is the end goal I want, for them to be happy and fulfilled. So from frustration, my intention is to love them and make sure they get to that end goal. What I try to do is twist it. So I'll, if the opportunity presents itself, I'll tell them, okay, might sound cheesy, like from a drama, but I think sometimes we just have to swallow it and do it. Like, I appreciate everything you've done for me all these years. And, I really love you like you love me. And sometimes I want to baby you just as you do me. So you know how people say when we're babies, we're reliant on our parents. And then, it flips, it reverses over time. And I'm like, so allow me to baby you and tell me, what do you want? Like, do you want to try a new experience? Like, and you always tell me, take care of my health. And I'm always pushing you, go exercise. I know it's hard for you to exercise because you're afraid any slight trip, fall, like you're walking on a treadmill, right? It could be devastating for you. So let's just go on walks together. 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes. It's nothing. Let's go to the convenience store nearby, buy an ingredient for dinner and come back. Like, if you can do small things regularly and you can have those conversations, that flips it around, because right now they're overbounding love and their children are their focus. If you can say, well, your focus, which is us, is completely fine on their own now, but worried about you. And when we converse that to them in a manner, kind of like a parenting manner, but also not, because it's what they do to us, where they make us feel guilty sometimes unintentionally. We just have expectations, high expectations of ourselves because of how they raised us up. And we want the best for them. So if we have those conversations where we're telling them just sincerely, like, we care about you, we notice these behaviors, and we love you, we want you to be more selfish, maybe it will make them think twice. Like, oh, my children want me to do this, and they want to buy this for me, or they want to teach me how to use this technology. Like, you're giving them what they want, which is time together, but at the same time, new experiences that they might not be brave to pursue themselves, or even just time together that's good for them. So you keep pushing them to exercise, but they're not doing it. So why not just use time together instead of staying in front of the TV, watching a movie or something? Go for a quick walk. And that does leaps and bounds of benefits for them. They're getting the exercise that they need while also spending time with you. And while, they might be homebodies and be very hesitant. In reality, when they're there, when you're together in that moment, it's a passing thought. It doesn't even cross their mind like, oh, I have to get dressed. I have to wear shoes, You just do it. And then maybe you do it enough times with them, it becomes something they look for, they crave. Maybe they'll start doing it on their own. So yeah, I think turn their love for you around so that your love for them is what is the focus, and you're able to express it in a manner that benefits them rather than focusing on the tiny frustrating things that they don't do or that they do that,
Thanks so much for sharing, Nadine. I think that really like ties into our like changing of perspective, like using a different way to look at it really makes a difference, and it really helps you see things from a different angle, from their angle, right? And I really relate to everything you said, especially about the one where you said like recognize that you feel guilty about it, but don't dwell on it, right? Like learn from it and then kind of do better next time, or figure out like another way to address it next time. And I think what you mentioned about like giving them time and stuff, I think when I was younger, I thought that financially, if I kind of helped them out with their financial concerns, like that would be good, right? Like as a child, I was like, hey, like they took care of me. But in my head, I was like, okay, monetarily, like that's what they gave me. Like financially, that's what they supported me with. So then as I was like going to uni, I was like, hey, like I'm going to pay back my parents like monetarily. But then like over the past few years, I've realized that, hey, maybe financial, like kind of get like presents, giving back to them wasn't really what they were looking for. What they were looking for was like time and like kind of just spending, quality time together, doing things together. And like, I guess like a more kind of emotional gift for them would be that. Like they don't really care about the financial gifts, but about like what the emotional gifts you give them, right? So that's when I realized like, hey, like maybe I just do different activities with them. Maybe I can spend time with them. Like if I worry about their health, I can go exercise with them, right? And they won't feel lonely. Or like even not exercise, figure out what kind of activities they enjoy. Maybe it's like playing chess. Maybe it's like doing something else, but it's something that gets their mind moving, gets their body moving, which is great for like just like maintaining their like health as they're aging. And I think I really like that you mentioned just going on walks with them and like trying new things with them more and more times, so then they also maybe would enjoy doing that too, and they can do it alone. But I do also see like, because I live away from my parents, it's also very hard. Like, how do I spend time with them if I can't go on walks with them? Like if I were here in Vancouver with my parents, I'd be like, hey, let's go for walks every Saturday after dinner. It's healthy. I get exercise. You get exercise, right? But when you're away from home, it's kind of like a bit difficult. And honestly, I'm still navigating like, how do I spend time with my parents while I'm away from home, but also get them to do things that are healthy for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely love this vein of conversation, because I think one thing that I learned a lot in kind of navigating my own path with my parents is, if I don't, in a sense, initiate specific activities to do that I think might help contribute to a quality time event, right? Eventually, it'll kind of go towards a default, which is like, let's go dim sum, right? Or, which is not a bad bonding activity, just to be clear, right? If you're doing that, by all means, that's good. It's not nothing, right? But like, as you say, right? Hey, if you're worried about their health, is eating every time we see each other the best way? Maybe not, right? Maybe having a walk is better. So what I really loved is the moment I started having a dog, right? I was like, let's walk the dog together, right? And that became a fun activity between me and my dad whenever he comes over. So what I just realized is, people build associations, right? So if they come and every time they're engaging with you, they're doing that one thing, right? Dim sum. Then they start believing that like, that's the only way I'll have time with my children, is if we're eating dim sum. So they'll keep initiating dim sum time with you. And maybe you don't, substitute dim sum of anything, right? Like watching TV, sitting on the couch, sitting in the car, whatever it might be. But if they associated that, and for whatever reason that doesn't fit in with your time that you want to spend, maybe you don't want to be eating dim sum every Sunday, right? Maybe you want to be doing something different. Like you absolutely have the power, right, to come in and say, hey, why don't we try something different this week, right?
Mm.
And I think that is what makes it so much more meaningful and gives you the chance to explore a different side of them. I think something very beautiful that I try to apply and thankfully has been going very well on this trip is that, I'm seeing a lot of family members. I'm from Canada, so a lot of my family members are, spread around Canada. And so on this trip, I try to ask them questions that I don't think anyone's asked them before, right? And I also try to ask them questions that would not come up regularly on the first meeting, right? After a long time. First meeting after a long time. Oh, how are you? Where are you studying now? What are you doing? What job are you doing? How's the weather back at home? How's the food back at home? How's the food here? Like it's very common conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, no, I mean, not no, but like, I try to cut in earlier enough and try to go deeper. I'm like, hey, what's been on your mind recently, right? What was your biggest win recently? What did you struggle with recently? Hey, is there anything I can help with now that I'm here? Like, I think those questions get to the real thick of things of like where they really have, everyone has problems, right? But they really have things that are on their mind and maybe they haven't had a chance to talk about it. Maybe even their closest relatives and their closest friends haven't asked them about it yet. And if I just come and I am able to have that engaged, very meaningful, deep conversation, that makes me very happy because I think that gets me a step deeper into building that, understanding up between each other. And I think what you're adding on to this, and I'm going to definitely apply it today, we should definitely apply it for your mom today, is like, hey, what can we do today that like is different than your day-to-day that could be a very meaningful activity that we can all do together that is going to help make all our lives better, right? So, damn, super powerful. I so appreciate that, Nadine. You don't realize, but I think that is by itself going to change someone's life out there. I really hope so, and definitely has changed mine. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you're having these conversations with your relatives might also, in the end, help your parents see you more as an adult. Because if you're having these deeper conversations with your relatives and they go back to your parents and be like, Conrad helped me solve this. And it's been on my mind for months. And then he mentioned this and solved.
Mm-hmm.
And their parents are like, yeah, they're so proud of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're gonna talk about you and put you on a pedestal. But maybe it will also help them shift like, oh, my son is solving my brother's problems. And, like he's so grown up now. And
yeah, I mean, that's interesting too. Like, and I think this is something that I'm going to come at it more from observation. And then maybe I'd like to also get validation from your guys too, because it's just my observation, right? The way I see it is that I think we're at 3 different stages of engagement with our parents, which is really cool because it gives people back home a lot of different ways to see the situation. I think where I'm at is I'm very lucky is that I'm at a very mature stage in this conversation. I'm lucky in the fact that like I went on down the path of intentionality and like, how to build a better life a few years ago, right? And that's kind of distilled into my everyday living, which then has distilled to my parents. So I'm very happy that my mom, like I said, has gone on that vacation by herself for the first time. It was a pilgrimage, right? She went to Switzerland, went to Austria, she went by herself. It was awesome, right? I'm so happy for her. My dad's making friends, right? And, really connecting with people and, having, support circles outside of his immediate nuclear family. I think that's awesome too, right? So I am seeing real change from the things I've done, which I'm very blessed and very happy about. And of course, as you say, they, because know that change is coming a bit from the work that I'm doing, they're of course very proud of what we're doing here at the foundation and also very strong believers in that. So I'm very mature stage in that. And I hope that's where we all get to as well here. What I'm observing from you, Nadine, I think is you're kind of in the middle of it, right? You're trying things out, right? You're trying to engage and you're trying to get in different things. And again, thankfully, you have the benefit of being close to your parents still today, right? Which I guess blessing and curse, right? You see a lot of the bad and the good, but in a sense, like I think you're in the thick of it and you're hoping to get the results, that you want. And I think they are coming, right? I don't think you're not getting what you want. And if anything, you're getting peace of mind for yourself, which I think is so important. Because I think otherwise, if you stay in the stage of like, oh no, I'm not doing enough. I know, no, we're just engaging on this like surface level. And maybe we're not getting as deep as I want to. And maybe they're not getting any other hobbies or engagements outside of themselves, like that can be a really tough experience for you. Absolutely. Right. So I think I'm really glad to see that you're in the middle of it. Right. And for Jessica, like, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but like I see you at like a bit of the start of it, right? Where you're reconnecting with your parents again and trying to figure out like how to navigate this. Honestly, we're seeing 3 different stages of this. And hopefully that is giving everyone confidence that there is a way out, right? And also like that just many, steps to it. You're not going to be 0 to 100 overnight. And it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. And definitely it's going to take, a lot of intentional effort from everyone, not just yourself. Yeah. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, I think so. I think you put it very well. And I wish I was in that middle ground, but I almost feel like I'm still where Jessica sat too, where a lot of the problems you mentioned, trying to make changes, feeling stuck and frustrated. That's where I'm at, like not seeing results. But at the same time, that's why it's a mindset shift, because I could see it as, wow, I'm sacrificing so much, setting aside time for them, and I'm not seeing the results. Or I could see it as, I made the decision to prioritize them.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? Results are out of my control. I can't control someone else, right? And you know that. But my intention is there, and I'm sure like it's enough. If I do my best, it is enough. And whatever comes of it, there will be a path forward. When you mentioned the calculating the finances, which I've done, like it sounds great when you're a child and you're like, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a Mercedes.
Yeah,
right?
buy a house. I'm going to pay you back. My scooter was this much. You're going to get this much back in pension. Like, oh yeah.
Exactly. It all sounds so great. But when push comes to shove and they reach a certain age, material things don't matter to them. Finances, monetary gains, like if they can live without starving, with a roof over their heads, and like what they built was their family core, and they can see their children are doing well, I think they feel fulfilled, which is why they're not hung up on what they might have given up, to get to that stage, to get to that point. Whereas we are still kind of hung up on it, which is why we're racked with guilt or whatever the case might be. We want to repay them. But in the end, like you said, their values are different. So we have to recognize what those are and then play on them and then give that to them. Because in essence, what you were touching on, I think, is while we were growing up, they wanted us to have the best opportunities and not suffer too much. Like if they had wisdom that they can share so that we don't make the same mistakes, they would. But if we choose to make the mistake, then that's on us and we would learn from it. But they were trying to solve our problems and make our life as problem-free as possible to get us to the next level that we can reach, to be better than they were or they are. We're all our own people. We're all good on certain extent. But they always say, I want you to be better than me. I want you to have a better future, better whatever. Now, I think we're trying to solve their problems, but from our own perspective. So the mindset shift would be, they don't see it as problems. Why do we? And yeah.
Absolutely. It's a problem that we see in the sense that like, hey, we are applying our own lens on it, right? Hey, we like having friends around. We like having purpose. Maybe you should like that too. Absolutely. I think that's where it starts from, where it's like, I have all these things that make me happy. These things I assume will make you happy too. Take it. So absolutely. That is like the beginning stage of this. And I resonate so much. I think what's really cool though, is what I realize, especially as I meet more of my older relatives who are now retired in their 70s, 80s, even 90s. And what I realize is, yes, there's a certain view that we are applying onto them that is our version of happiness. But I think ultimately everyone still should discover their own form of happiness, right? And I think it's not sustainable for anything to be hinged on someone else that is eventually going to have their own life. I think that's a recipe for disaster, recipe for unhappiness. And there's many ways people try to solve it, right? It's like, I heard some relatives saying, you get a duplex, right? In-laws live in one, your family lives in another. Sure, right? They're close enough, but separate enough. But if left unchecked, they probably want more and more interaction as well, right? It's not going to be enough because if your happiness is solely from seeing your kids every single day, then you wake up and you don't see them. You're going to go walk over to your house and you're going to see them. But what if they have an event? What if they have an engagements? How do you take that, right? And I think for all the parents who are listening out there, I think that's going to be a very difficult place to be in if that's going to be your only source of satisfaction in your life. I'm just saying, why don't you get a few more options, right? And even to the point where you're like, hey, I don't want to hang out with you. I have my own thing to do, right? I think that's pretty fun. I'd much rather have that kind of like openness to many more versions of satisfaction and happiness in your life. And so I don't want to take away that. I still think absolutely, if you think family is important, by all means, I am here for you, right? But how can we give you more options, right? So that it's not just on one. And it's the same for us too, by the way. Like for personal development, I think something very important that I think about often is, let's say I love tea, as an example, and I'm only going to be happy when I drink tea. Well, I don't want to be miserable when I'm not drinking tea, right? Like, I shouldn't be opposite of happy if I don't have that, right? And the only way that happens is if I like more stuff than that. I like talking to you. I like talking to you. I like being here. I like breathing, whatever it might be. And like, if you can choose more things to just be satisfied with in your life, I just think that's overall a better recipe for long-term sustenance in terms of healthy living, happier living. And yeah, I mean, that in the end will help them live the best life that they can lead. Yeah.
I think, like you mentioned, just as each generation has their own problems, each generation also has their own form of happiness.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we don't always realize. It's like we have this, I think we have a very privileged definition of, not definition, but like there are different forms of happiness. And I think a lot of people in our generation have a very privileged forms of happiness. Whereas maybe I think for my parents' generation, like for them, happiness was a singular thing. Maybe they'll find it to be not a singular thing as they're growing older. But even if it was still a singular thing, I think if it made them happy, then yeah, it makes them happy and I'm happy for them. Yeah.
Do your parents have, like mine do, comfort food where ever since they were growing up, whenever they got sick, for example, that's what they ate. Until now, they look for that comfort food, and that is their singular happiness.
No, I don't think they have comfort food per se, but they definitely have a comfort activity that they always gravitate towards whenever they have either free time or when they're feeling sad, and I think that makes them feel better. Yeah.
So I think maybe to like kind of have a nice kind of wrap on this episode too, maybe we can go around and share one or two techniques that we might apply after today to our parental relationships that we think might help engage them in a different way. I mean, I can start too because I have something on my mind. And again, I'm very thankful to Nadine for bringing this up, is that I think um, one thing I do is I share with them often about like, hey, think about what you want in life. Think about what else you want to do beyond like, immediate career aspirations or immediate, family aspirations. What do you as an individual want? But I think beyond that, like, I think creating more shared activities that like, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to join? Because like I often, perhaps like you, like think the assumption that like things that I enjoy might not be things that they might really enjoy from the get-go. So like we were doing painting by numbers one day, right? And we are like doing some painting. Maybe my dad would have liked that. I don't know, right? Maybe my mom would like that when we get to Toronto, and maybe we can try that with her, right? But I think we often assume that the things that we care about are not what they care about. And if I'm doing like a nice, cute activity for myself anyways, why not include them, right? So I think that's something I'm really going to try to do moving forward. Yeah. Let's go next.
I can. I think I want to try spending more one-on-one time with my parents individually, because I think what you mentioned was they still see us as children. And I think it's normal. Like, we've been under their care for so many years. Natural that they'll think of us still as their children. But I think it'd be like really cool if they like spend one-on-one time and see if they can get to know me as an adult.
Yeah. When Conrad was talking about making sure that, they're not dependent and they can find their own way to happiness, I definitely second that. And you can't let them rely on you, even though you want to serve them because you're living your own life, right? You're finding that balance. And it's very important to have that distinction, make sure they understand that too. Because yesterday I was really frustrated. For example, my mom cooked dinner before she went out for her own dinner outing with old colleagues, so friends. And she came home and found what she cooked was still there. We didn't ask her to cook, right? It's just motherly nature. She's done it for years. When she cooks for the family. My dad's the only one who ate her cooking. Me, my brother, my brother was at work, so he has a legit reason. But me, I fell asleep after work and I woke up at 8 p.m. and I just wasn't hungry. And she came home around that time. She's like, feeling unappreciated. Why do I bother cooking? I could hear her at 11 p.m. talking to herself, like muttering, but loudly. So I assume she's making it heard.
Yes, loudly mothering.
Yeah. And that used to bother me. I'd feel guilty. I'd go down, shove it in my mouth and say thanks for the food, so that hopefully she feels appreciated, or I think that's what she wants me to do. But I have my own schedule. I work and my body clock works on its own, right? If I'm not hungry, why am I forcing myself to eat? It's not healthy for me. It's harder and harder to lose weight as we get older. So I don't let it bother me anymore. I try to let go of the guilt, and instead I was trying to think, how can I let her know her gesture is appreciated?
Yes.
But I also told her while she was cooking, why are you cooking so much? And that was my not so obvious way of saying, I don't need you to cook for me. Like, I can provide for myself. If I'm hungry, I will make food or find food, right? So I haven't found a way yet to make it up for her, but I realized that and I acknowledged it to myself so I can let go of the guilt. And when I was thinking about the conundrum that Jessica is in, where usually she's not here, she's not in a place where she can drive to her parents and spend time with them. It made me think of also what you said, and what my own relative does. So I have a cousin. She lives in Australia, but her parents are in the homeland, Philippines. And it's tough. But I was surprised because I just visited the Philippines and I lived with them for a bit. Every single day, she actually calls them and she does nothing. She sometimes they're not even talking. She's just there on the iPad and they're eating dinner. Like, it's almost like she's having a meal with them, but she's
cute.
not, maybe she'll grab a snack and eat with them. But usually it's like nighttime over there. So she might be studying, getting ready for bed because that's why she's there, studying and working. And that was the way they spent time together. And also she would listen in on their conversation, like dinner conversation, and she could be a part of it. And then they also installed this camera in their kitchen, like near the entrance. So anytime someone came home, she would get a notification on her phone, like some like camera notification.
That's cute.
And then that's when she knows, oh, they're home. Now I can call, And then I was like, that's a really ingenious way of still being in each other's lives while you're far, far apart. And you don't have to have a call every day. I thought, that might be excessive, a bit of a unique situation just because their family's super duper close knit. But it made me think for myself, why did I, there are always solutions, right? And resources, especially in this technological age, that we can find. We don't have to solve things ourselves. Maybe we wouldn't have thought of it ourselves, but if we opened our eyes or we asked other friends, other cousins, relatives who like, surely this problem is not something only you're dealing with, right? Then you might find an ingenious solution like that. Because I used to think, I forced myself to stay at home during college years to save my family money, so that I could be with my family. And then I regretted that later on because I felt I didn't get the full experience that I could have. I didn't grow myself that I could have because I was in a comfortable, sheltered, non-changing environment.
Yeah.
So I think that might be, through that story, I hope it gives you ideas on things you can do. And as for what I'll do for myself, from my own situation, I kind of want to do what Jessica said.
Okay.
I want to make it so that my parents can treat me more like an adult. So I'm going to apply what we talked about, trying to introduce them to new things, or even you don't need to suggest it to them. You can invite them, or you can just talk about it. Like, I did this today with this person. Including them in your life by just sharing what you're doing also gives them a broader perspective that hopefully makes them want to live a richer life. I think, at least.
That's lovely. I want to give you one thing.
Yeah.
One super tool that I found that is helpful, specifically to, you mentioned that you were trying to help your mom understand that you didn't need her to cook by saying, why are you cooking? So why questions really, really are ineffective in these situations. It's not your fault, right? I think we all try to ask why because we want to know, hey, why are you doing this? That's what we're trying to ask. And that's our inner monologue that comes out as our outer dialogue. So, but what's a question that usually helps a lot more in these situations is, asking what and how questions are much better in these situations because it helps the individual think more about it. Because they might not even know why. Like I said, it's a habit. They're just a mother, right? They just cook things, right? So they say, hey, when do you think I might be able to eat this? And she's like, oh, maybe. She starts saying stuff like, maybe after, when you're hungry. I'm like, oh, what if I'm going to be taking a nap, right? She's like, oh, okay. And so she starts thinking about like different reasons of like what she's doing and how it might actually play an impact in your life. And then so she'll start thinking about like, maybe I don't need to do this. Or maybe she'll even cook in a different way. Maybe she'll pack it in the fridge, right? Maybe she'll make a smaller sandwich, right? Or even like, usually do you think I'm hungry after work, right? And like so ask questions that like make them really question it without using the why, because people can't answer why. It's hard to ask why. Like even if you ask me why, like it's because you do a lot of introspection that you can answer why questions for yourself. And if they already are in that state of like they're just autopiloting it, asking why is just going to scare them. What, how, when, all those other questions, everything but why.
All right, I will practice that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. It's lovely to have Nadine here. Such a treat. Hopefully you guys agree. If you guys have anything you'd like to share about this conversation, please let us know down in the comments below. We'd love to hear about your experience, and hopefully something here we shared has helped you as well. With that in mind, please have a wonderful day and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Don't forget to keep leveling up.